The right habits put you in control of your health, relationships, mindset, and more. But most people lack the tools to stick with those habits long enough to see results. That is about to change. Welcome to the Unshakable Habits Podcast with your host, habit change specialist and speaker, Stephen Box. Join us each week as experts share their stories, experiences, and insights, and give you the tools to build unshakable habits so you can live life on your terms. It's time to take your habits from unsustainable to unshakable.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Unshakable Habits Podcast. I am your host, Stephen Box, and I'm joined today by the owner of LifeUpEducationTV, the author of the book. I forget the name of your book already. The Game of Self Domination. Thank you. I just had a complete brain freeze there for a minute. Please help me in welcoming Natsune Oki to the show today.
Hi, Stephen. Thank you very much for having me.
Definitely appreciate you being here today. So one thing that we're going to do today is we're going to dive through your story because you help people really with their mindset. That's your specialty, especially people who struggle to keep that positive mindset, who are struggling to live their dreams out, because you have had that experience yourself. You've got this great story of going from struggling to being very successful, and we're going to walk through that. But I want for the audience to look at your story through our Unshakable framework. This is a framework that you will see over and over again in life, and different people might use different terminology for it. But you're going to see this play out, and you're going to see all these different parts today in Natsune's story. So the first thing is you have to have a vision. Once you have a vision in place, you either have to start to recognize what skills you already have that you can utilize, or you have to create new skills. And then in order to create those skills, you're going to need to take some daily actions. So make sure you're looking out for those three parts, that vision, those skills, and those actions as you listen today, and see where you can take her story and use it in your own life to be able to achieve your dreams. So Natsune, tell me a little bit about your backstory.
Yes, so my name is Natsune Oki. I'm a speaker at LifeUpEducationTV.com. I'm also the author of the book called The Game of Self Domination, which is very interesting how you describe the framework, because I also talk about that, of like how someone can create mental transformation in three different phases. I actually break it down to three phases. I also have this business consultancy in Tokyo that advises companies in Japan and America how to launch and expand their businesses in Japan and America by providing like marketing, branding, PR service, and also project management service. And that's what I do.
So you stay pretty busy, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's a lot of moving parts that I always have to keep up with, but I like it. I like to keep myself busy.
So now, when you talk about all these different things that you're doing, how did you get here? So kind of take us back to the beginning. I know when we had talked before, when we did our pre-interview, you talked about moving over to the United States for a little while, and you're in Japan now.
Right.
But you lived over in the United States for a while, and there was a bit of a struggle while you were here. So this is not something that you just woke up one day and you were successful. This was a process that you had to go through. And I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of lessons to be learned in that process. So kind of take us back to when you came over to the US and you were struggling a little bit.
Yeah. So actually, I'm still struggling as of today, right? Like just like everybody else, like I'm just trying to do my best at the best I know. And every day is still battle. And I picked this battle. That's why like I truly appreciate the growth journey. Like I'm not trying to live out of like someone else's growth journey, right? So that's why like I actually, anyway, so taking back to where I started, I was a student here until high school, and I was born and raised in Japan. I didn't speak English. I was, so to speak, kind of like failing student. The school system didn't really fit me. Like although I was a, like okay, so here in Japan, high school is kind of works like university. Like at the high school level, people kind of judge you by your IQ, and people already make assumption of how successful you become by high school. So from that standard, I didn't go to like bad school, quote unquote. Like I went to actually like somewhat smart school, but in that group, I just didn't fit in. I struggled a lot of finding my identity. And that's the age where you're very sensitive of finding who you are, right?
Yeah.
But I basically got into the school and I lost my drive because I studied really hard there. Like I already had this like, hustler mentality. Like I
Yeah.
literally studied like 12, 13 hours like every day just to get to that school. Um, but yeah, I struggled through that. And during that time, what I noticed was I I didn't fit in, and because the school taught us how to be part of the group, and that was an environment that I felt just really uncomfortable with being.
Yeah.
So I decided to go to the United States because I knew that in this society of what I know, Japanese society, I wouldn't be considered as having a bright future. Like somewhat, I couldn't fit in this box. That's why people kind of wanted to get rid of me. Wherever I go, like I would have my own opinion. I wanted to express it and everything like that. And that wasn't very interesting to anyone else. That was kind of annoying to people, I noticed. So that's why I decided to go to United States, because I heard about this country of this like great freedom, and everybody can have this great opportunity that at the time I didn't have. It felt like here. So I needed to seek out for like a big change. So without speaking English, without necessarily having like any plan really, I went to the States. I went to the United States. And I started studying English first, and I got into this 2-year college that's like very popular for any international students. And I finished my business degree there. And at the time, it just didn't make sense for anyone to hire me because, again, like you're thinking about this Japanese girl, like teenager, who just had this like 2-year degree, who doesn't even speak good English, like she doesn't know nothing, right? Like no company wanted to hire me. However, my second courageous journey started there. Like it just didn't make sense for me to go out of the school system to get like actual working experience competing against the other Americans, right? There just wasn't enough reason for me to do that. But something inside of me really like pushed me to go out of that like education system to actually go get real world experience in American environment.
Mm.
And another thing I was very attracted to was entrepreneurship. Somehow I already somehow I always admired this like hustler, like working really hard, like building something from nothing. Because referring back to the high school, like that experience where I studied really hard, I had to study hard because I was stupid. Like I wasn't stupid, but like I didn't have a good grade at all. Like it was, and people told me that it was unrealistic for me to pick that school. It's like we're talking about like university school working as university system in America, right? Like
Yeah.
in high school, it's a big deal, like which school you go to. So it was impossible. People told me it was impossible, but it was that drive that I had. It was this like resistance that I had that really fired me up. And then same kind of feeling I had, impression I had for entrepreneurship. That's why I really wanted to go in there.
Yeah.
So again, like without necessarily making sense of like how that could have worked, I just jumped in. Like I didn't have money, I didn't have a place to live for that matter, right? Like I just fresh out of college, I didn't have any network, no money, like broken English, like everything, right? And out of nowhere, just like started hustling, networking, meeting tons of people, making tons of friends. And finally, actually, I landed this position, like a marketing role
Mhm.
in Seattle Tech Hub. Like there was a big hub in Seattle
Uh-huh.
that was for tech entrepreneurs. So I slowly kind of started getting into the community and started like um, networking and getting know a lot of people. So I found some opportunities, even though I I didn't it didn't make sense for me to have opportunity to begin with. Um, and then during that time, there was something incredible happened that led me to Life Up Education TV today. Was that I was really inspired by how these leaders were leading to the next future using the power of technology. They were so excited about what technologies
Mm.
are enabling us to do, like enabling us to create. It wasn't, well, of course, it's a business, so it is a little bit of money topic,
Yep.
but there was something beyond the money. Like they were truly excited about creating a future for the humanity using the power of technology. And we were literally taking the level of humanity from here to there, to the next level. And that was such an inspiring experience for me. And am I speaking too much? I feel like
No,
I
you're
need
you're
to,
good.
like,
If
I feel like I need to ask you a question. I'm sorry.
if you if you
Um,
if you if you if you if you need a break, I can point out some stuff.
yeah, but I'm gonna finish this story, but I'm gonna keep it quick because I'm sure that we have more interesting questions to talk about later. But so long story short, it really inspired me during that period where I got to work with tech entrepreneurs and investors who were building the future. And there was this excitement that I could like literally feel and picked myself. And that led me to study economics over business, because what I noticed at the time was I was interested in future, two things. I was interested in future and I was
Mhm.
interested in people, destiny for people, like how
Yeah.
things impact people's life. I
Yeah.
wasn't so much money driven. So what I noticed was like it's better I study economics because economics has subject for business, money, but also it
Mhm.
has a lot of space for people, like politics, technology, education, like all that
Yeah.
things combined. So I decided to study economics, and after that year, I finished school, and I was ready for the new challenge, right? So I was in Seattle for the past like 7 years at that time, or 6 years at that point.
Mhm.
I moved to Florida, so completely the opposite side of the country.
Yeah.
And once again, starting from nothing, I didn't even have an idea of like where I would live, right? Like no
Right.
apartment, no place to live, no money, nothing, no connection, no job, whatever. I just moved,
Mhm.
and I hustled the gang to like find my position. And I actually went through some kind of like very unquestionable companies, like to get to like my finally um more like stable role as a consultant later on. um but it was also another very critical time of my life because first of all, I think it that decision says a lot about who I am. Like I'm fearless. I value experience over money. I value like I was looking for that like desperation again. Like I needed that in order for me to grow. So it was such a critical part of, and then also my entertainment career, like a very little entertainment career, kind of started at that time. Um, so it was really good. But anyway, so later on, basically, what I was able to do was I found this like marketing consulting role in this
Mhm.
business consulting company in Miami, and I stayed there, and then eventually I came back to Japan, and I was selling their service to Japanese clients. And eventually I decided that maybe it makes sense that I do the same of what I do now, but do it for more companies from America. So I would just sell services from America to Japanese companies or do the
Mhm.
vice versa. So that's how I led to Foreign Connect. And at that time, I was also running my own like clothing brand, BillionDollarBabyStory. Um, and then around the same time, um, I decided that I wanted to go into media more. I wanted to be in front of people because I I'm good at like talking to people. I'm good with people. I love people. And I had this vision and inspiration about creating a future for people, right? And I thought about what can I do? Do I want to be startup owner who like this might change later on, but at that time when I asked myself a question, I just didn't think that I would be good like technology startup owner. My strengths is like media. My strengths is talking to people. My strengths is being on a camera. So I decided that Life Up Education TV is great because it covers that. The purpose of Life Up Education TV that I have is to encourage people,
Mhm.
each individual people, but also at the same time by encouraging individual people's performance, I'm really adding them up to the macro performance, and therefore, we as a humanity can create the best output macro at the macro level.
Yeah.
So that's like a very short version of what it is, but basically that's how I got into the story of Life Up Education TV. And I feel like I've been speaking for like 3 hours by now. So let's let's give some space for your comment or something.
All right. So love the fact that that was the short version.
That was very short. Wow. That was just a second of my story.
So let's although you really kind of glossed over a lot of details there to shorten that up, I do want to kind of go back and revisit some of it because I want to make sure that people didn't miss a few really key points in there.
Okay.
So number one is you had this experience multiple times in your life where people doubted you,
Yeah. Hmm.
where you didn't necessarily live up to the standard that other people thought you should have.
Hmm.
And I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah.
But what happens a lot of times is we allow those stories to
Hmm.
become our identity, right?
Hmm.
So it's, oh, I'm not smart.
Hmm.
Oh, I can't do this. And what I love about your story is you kind of had this attitude of, you know what? No one, and I'm not saying you necessarily thought about it this way. I'm rephrasing just a little bit. So, but it was almost like your story came across to me as, you know, people don't expect much of me. So
Hmm.
if I fail, all I've done is lived up to expectations.
Hmm.
But if I don't fail, if I'm successful, then I proved everybody wrong.
Hmm.
Now, I think you're probably more like motivated by the prove everybody else wrong part of that, but it's a part of that where I think that's a valuable lesson for people to see is that so often we worry about, well, what if I fail?
Yeah.
So what? So what if you do? Like,
Like, hmm, I
you
think
know,
I was driven a lot by proving someone wrong before, but as I go more and more deep to my journey, I don't think about how people think about me now at all. Like, mm, I think major things that I learned so far is that I don't mean shit to anyone. Like, that goes for my success, that goes for my failure, right? Like, no one's life is predicated on my failure nor success.
yeah,
So, whatever I achieve or whatever I do as a failure, that wouldn't mean anything to anyone else, you know?
yeah,
So, for me right now, it feels more like I do things out of my necessity.
hmm,
Like, there's this quote that I heard from Elon Musk that really stuck with me. He says, if you need inspiring word to pursue your dream, don't do it.
yeah,
And I think about that a lot. Like,
yeah,
I just feel like it's becoming part of what I need to do in order for me to be happy, rather
yeah,
than like I need to show someone, you know? And
yeah,
I think when you don't have, like, when you get rid of that, like, I need to show someone, you can be
yeah,
more patient because it's a very slow process
yeah,
that you have to go through. And there's going to be a lot of mental resistance that's going to
yeah,
try to bring you down, right?
Right.
But when you are truly focusing on like not your relatives, not your parents, not your friends, not your competitor, not no one, but your progress,
Yeah.
then you have more willingness and patience to see your process, right? Like even if it happens slower.
Yeah.
So for me, it feels a lot more like that right now. That I just do things out of a necessity more than having to prove something to someone.
Yeah, and I love the clarification there because I should have actually put that in past tense because you you did feel that way.
Mhm.
Obviously, now we can look at your book, right? Your book is about self domination. It's not about world domination, right? So it's
Yeah.
not about
That's a
it's
next step, right? It's a
yeah.
next step.
Like we'll leave it up to the audience to decide whether world domination is a next step or a step back. We'll let them decide that for themselves.
No, I'm just kidding. I don't want to dominate the world. It's already enough, like to dominate myself. Like that's a lot to dominate.
It might be easier to dominate the world, to be honest.
Yeah, it might be. Actually, yeah, it might be the step backwards.
So when I was listening to your story, though, we talked about the framework, and
Mhm,
we saw kind of version one of the framework in your story already.
mhm,
You had this vision and your vision evolved over time. It started as, okay, I'm going to go somewhere else where I can get a fresh start, where I don't have these expectations that are put on me here.
mhm,
And, so I'm going to go to America. It's this land of opportunity, and I'm going to try to be successful there.
mhm,
And because you had this vision of what you wanted your life to be, you didn't allow things like the fact that you didn't really speak English. You didn't allow the fact that you had no money, that you had nowhere to stay, that you
mhm,
didn't know anybody there or anything like that. You didn't allow that to be like, oh, I can never do that because I don't have any reason to be able to do it. You just did
mhm.
it. Like you just took that chance.
Yeah.
And then when you went to Seattle, you get around all these people who have their own visions and you're getting to see the way they're manifesting their visions.
Mhm,
And then that seems to have inspired you a little bit to start thinking more about what you wanted your vision to be. And that's when you're like, hey, you know what? Money is great. You're not going to turn down the money, right? But
mhm,
at the same time, that's not what you're all about. You kind of saw how these people were very passionate about helping and make the world better, and you're like, you know what? I want to do something like that. I want to have a positive impact on people's lives.
mhm,
And so you started that process, and then you realized, hey, you know what? I maybe need to study economics instead of business.
mhm,
And so you went out and that's a skill that you started to develop. And then you took
mhm,
actions. You went to school, you studied hard, you went out, you met people, you did all these things to build up that skill set so that you
mhm,
had that better understanding of these things. So we've already seen kind of version one of the framework in your life where you've taken that. And then when you started doing the consulting and you came back to Japan, now all of a
mhm,
sudden you kind of get this new vision of, hey, you know what? Still kind of in the same area, but now I have this other opportunity that's kind of, you know, associated with what I'm doing. It's the same kind of work, but I can do this for myself. So then all of a sudden the vision became rather than just working for someone else, it was working for yourself and
mhm,
doing this on your own. And then, as you further developed your vision, you started saying, you know what? I want to have entertainment stuff. I want to inspire people. I want to do all these different things. And so now you have the Life Up Education TV, which you have just like content that's all over the place, right? Like
mhm.
I was checking out some of your videos and it's like it's the only place I've seen it where you can go and get your mindset tips for the day, watch somebody sing and get makeup tips. It's all in one place. You can
Oh
you
yeah.
can get it you can
Mhm.
get it you can get it all there. It's like a one-stop shop. So
Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, so I see you've got this vision and this vision has evolved over time. And I think sometimes people do get caught up on this idea that they have to know everything right now, that we need to know every single detail, everything has to be planned out, that we have to
Mhm,
live this perfect existence.
mhm,
And that's the other thing I loved with your story is you started off with, hey, Yes, I'm a book author, I'm a speaker, I have my website, I have a successful company, but you know what? I'm still struggling because I'm not perfect. And
Mhm.
this is an ongoing, everyday, probably for the rest of my life kind of thing, right? It's not, you're never going to arrive. You're never going
Mhm.
to be there. It's always something that you're constantly going to get better on. So,
Mhm.
that's my summary of your story for the audience.
Yes, and I want to add one thing.
Yes.
So there was this quote, and I love that you brought it up about like it's a constant battle, it's a constant like improvement.
Yeah.
There's one quote that I heard that really stuck with me in my head now. I can't remember his name, but he's like a spiritual person,
Mhm.
I think from Celia. He said, if you are stupid, you're confused. If you are smart, perhaps you're more confused. So life is not about figuring out everything.
Yeah.
Life is about figuring out how to use your confusion to your benefit. And to me, that made perfect sense. Like that gave me
Yeah.
so much clarity. I think no one's figured out anything, right? Like that's why like what I talk about what I talk about in my book a lot is, if you're someone who wants to get to like that place and
Yeah.
then you think that you're gonna be happy forever, like that story doesn't exist in my book. I'm
Yeah.
always like pushing for it's a continuous journey.
Yep.
It's messy. Like there's no this answer. There's no this secret and answer that you can like somehow get to, right? And
Yep.
people don't feel comfortable about that. Like people like to be told that there's this answer. There's this
Mhm.
one perfect island that you can get
Yep.
to or something like that in the end of the day, right? It's super uncomfortable, but
Yep.
the truth is there is none of that, right?
Yeah.
And if you think about it, like everything we create today is man-made. And if you think about it, it's so crazy, but the concept of time is even man-made. Like concept of time still even have a little bit subjectivity in it, depending on who's experiencing it.
Yeah.
So I read this crazy thing. Someone said the true unit of measure is the only energy, how much like how many particles are
Mhm.
existing in an object is the
Right.
only true unit of measurement in what we know today in today's science. Everything else we have, even going from 1 plus 1 equal 2, like everything, it's man-made.
Yeah.
So life is like that. Like we made answers so that things can become easy for us to understand. That's why we are told to look for answer 1 plus 1 equal 2. Like
Yeah.
we are told to look for the some sort of pattern recognition and rules, right? But at the very like deep like life,
Mhm.
there's no answer for anything, right?
Yeah.
So it's super uncomfortable. It's not as easy for people to consume that concept. It just doesn't feel good, right? When someone say, oh, there's no answer, like
Mm.
it just doesn't feel comfortable for us, right? We can't process that.
Yeah.
But I think life works like that. There's just no answer, and it's super
Yeah.
uncomfortable, but you need to learn how to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations, and that's just accumulation of those things.
Yeah. I love that because the thing I think so many people miss out on is they get focused on a goal. And I've done
Mhm.
quite a few of these interviews already. And every time that I've interviewed people, I've noticed a pattern. The people who are the most successful, the
Mhm.
people that people look at and say, "Oh wow, their story's so amazing."
Mhm.
Those people, they never like necessarily set out to do the thing that they've done, right? It's always like been this constant progress toward it. And it
Mhm.
was something that came up maybe along the way. But like no one ever said, you know what? When I was 10 years old, I decided I'm going to write a book and be a professional speaker, right? Like that's not
Mhm.
like that's not what, happens most of the time.
Mhm.
And what I've noticed is in people that I've coached over the years, when they've really struggled with something,
Mhm,
it's because they've gotten very outcome focused. Like, I have to get to this one outcome. So, like, an
mhm,
easy example, just because I spent 10 years working in the health and fitness area, is when people come to me for weight loss, it was like, oh, I have to lose 20 pounds, right? And let's say they lost 19 pounds.
mhm,
Amazing accomplishment. They're only like 1 pound less than what their goal was. They're in great shape. They're healthy. Everything is good. But they start doing unhealthy things to get that last pound off just because their goal was 20 pounds. And they feel
mhm,
like they've somehow failed because they were only at 19.
mhm,
And it's when we lock ourselves into something like that and we
mhm,
become so focused on that one thing,
mhm,
we miss opportunities to grow. We miss
mhm.
opportunities around us because we've now closed our mind off to the possibilities there. And,
And
and I and I
mhm,
think the way you kind of said it, it makes that sums it up nicely where it's like, hey, if we're focused just on what the outcome is, if we're chasing after one specific thing,
mhm,
we're going to convince ourselves that there's some like big payoff there. There's some big level of happiness when we get there.
mhm.
And the reality is there isn't. The
It's the
happiness
same,
is on the
same
journey.
keywords.
Mm,
And
yeah.
one thing I want to add to that is I think depending on your profession, but especially this is important for entrepreneurs, is that you just can't expect anything to be perfect. Like you have to stay practical. You have to be flexible. You have to stay flexible because
Yep.
things is not gonna go. Sometimes things are not gonna go in the way you wish, right? But you have to be adaptable. You have to adapt to the situation, whatever is happening.
Yep.
You can't stick with your ego. Like
Right.
you can't decide what's good for you and
Mhm.
assume that that's good for everyone else, right?
Right.
But you as a role of entrepreneur is to listen to whatever is good for the audience or for whoever you're delivering to and be
Yep.
adaptable and not so fixed with your own ego or your own idea.
Yep.
So I think that has to do a lot also with the capability in leadership and also navigating through uncomfortable entrepreneurial journey because there's no textbook for entrepreneurship. Whatever works
Yep.
works, and you gotta do what works.
Yeah, it's actually funny you mentioned that because I just did a video last night,
Hmm.
and my topic was, are you evolving or revolving? Are you just going around the same path over and over? Or are you actually changing and making tweaks?
Hmm.
And most of the time people think like, "Oh, you always have to evolve." And it's like, "Well, no. If something's working, then keep revolving, right? Just keep
Hmm.
doing what's working." Like, hey, because like you said earlier, none of us really know. Like, we're
Hmm.
all guessing,
Hmm.
and then we luck out and we find something. I used to
Yeah.
always say that luck is when opportunity meets persistence, right?
Hmm.
So if we constantly work hard and then an opportunity comes up, then we get, quote unquote lucky.
Hmm.
So it kind of goes along with what you're saying there, where we don't really know.
Hmm.
Most of us are just kind of filling it out. And the people who think they know are usually the people who fall flat on their face because they got caught up in their own ego, like you said. So
Hmm.
it's definitely it's a situation where it's a little bit tricky, right? Because and maybe you can tell people how you go about doing this or how you help other people do this. How do you have confidence
Hmm.
and believe in yourself, but also at the same time willingly acknowledge that you don't have all the answers and that you have to figure it out.
I call it leadership because leaders are just as much as scared as
Mhm.
followers, and also leaders don't have just like leaders also don't have all the informations that they need or like just as much as clueless as followers are, right?
Yeah.
But I call that leadership. Leaders are needed because they bring certainty into uncertain situations.
Yeah.
So I call that initiation. It's almost like capability ability, and also this is a capability that people can train and work on. People
Yeah.
can try to practice how to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations.
Yeah.
on I think only way to do it is to throw yourself at uncomfortable situations
Yeah.
and stay still. But yeah, that's my answer.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. Stay
Mhm.
still. That's really hard for most people because
Mhm.
when things get uncomfortable, we're like, okay, let me shift over to something else, right? This feels really awkward. I'm gonna move now.
Mhm. And like honestly, like I root for that. I'm all in for that. I think it's accountability. Like this is actually good. This is actually healthy. I
Yeah,
think not everybody should win. Like I think competition is actually healthy.
yeah,
And I'm not saying that there's someone winning and there's someone losing at life. I'm
yeah,
saying that you might lose in this, whatever the field that you're in,
yeah,
but you're not going to always lose. Your life is not one dimensional. You have
yeah.
multiple things.
Right.
Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And if whatever you're pursuing right now is not your thing,
Yeah,
you shouldn't win. Like you should let who's supposed to win in that field
yeah,
versus you also have your own wins in life.
yeah,
And I think that free competition works in that way. Not everybody should get the medal for just participating.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm definitely from the not everybody deserves a middle generation. So it's like I'll give you a pat on the back for the effort, but not everyone deserves the medal, right? Like
But and then I think it's actually like it teaches you how to be patient.
yeah,
And if you look at it from like very long-term perspective, I think this encourages really healthy behavior
yeah,
because it encourages work like hard working hardworking attitude.
yeah,
It inspires you to have inspiration, like search for inspiration, hunger. So all these things that comes with benefit, but that's gonna take time, right? Like for people to develop this kind of characteristic does take time. So
yeah,
people lose patience and then people just wanna like give participation medal for everyone
yeah.
because otherwise it's harder. But in long term, I think this free competition system actually works better and more healthier.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit on it without really going into depth, but it's really a mindset issue, right? It's
Mhm.
how do you look at, winning or losing? And, even going further to how do you define what winning or losing even looks like? Because you think about the Olympics, right?
Mhm.
Perfect example. The Olympics, you usually have maybe one, two, maybe like three at the most people in an event who really have a legitimate chance at winning the gold medal, right?
Mhm.
And there's always going to be that person there who they know they're probably coming in last place. Like they're just like they go into it like I know I'm going to go in last place, right?
Mhm.
But for them just to be able to go and represent their country and be in the Olympics is a
Mhm.
huge win. They don't
Mhm.
care if they're the last place person in the entire event because they
Mhm.
were there. Whereas
Mhm.
someone else, they might be the favorite to win the gold medal. So for them, anything less than winning the gold medal might be
Mhm.
considered a failure.
Mhm.
Excuse me. So it's all perspective and it's all about where you are. And I think you kind of touched on that with saying, you know, maybe you're not supposed to win in this particular area of life. Maybe this is
Mhm.
somebody else's area to win. And
Mhm.
so,
And
from a mindset perspective, I
mhm.
think that's a huge shift for a lot of people is accepting where are you at right now in your journey.
Mhm. And I think I'm not particularly like generalizing as far as like field, I guess. I think I misused the word. But for example, um, I keep going back to entrepreneurship, but that's because like I have a lot of admiration in that area.
Mhm.
But for example, I think there's gonna be discouraging things, and you might have this self doubt. Am I gonna be able to make it? Like, am I good enough? Blah blah blah. And that should shift out some people who are not strong enough
Yeah.
mentally to handle the success that they get when they have success, right? Like for me, that's like part of the game too. Like
Yeah.
I guess I think I misused the word like success. Like it was probably a bad example, but what I'm trying to say is like it's a continuous battle. Like yes, there's gonna be doubts, there's gonna be rejections, there's gonna be failures,
Mhm.
and once that can persevere, regardless of these things, in the end, in this competition, should win, right?
Yeah.
And then in competition, people who can't bring themselves up to want to pursue, regardless of all the hardships that they have to go through,
Yeah.
then it's okay. Like they shouldn't they shouldn't continue, right? And then so basically it kind of filters out who's out, who's in, who keeps being in.
Yeah.
So I think it's a battle. Like you would face constant challenges, and then the only ones that can like really persevere really deserves to win the competition in the end of the day. And I had a point that I wanted to make. What was your question? I wanted to link it back to what you said, but I forgot.
I don't know. We kind of all went all around, so I'm not even really sure what the question was anymore myself. So
Yeah, but that's kind of how I look at it in terms of mindset. Like I think it's really binary. Like whether are you gonna stay in your team or are you gonna join other people who's gonna discourage you and tell you you suck, and join their team and be like, yeah, I suck. Like let me just like abandon myself and let me just join this like easier side, right? Like,
yeah.
and that's okay too. Like there's a learning there, right? Like you can
Yeah.
also see that as part of your experience, and so it's not necessarily negative eh, per se, that experience.
Yeah.
But I guess the point here is you don't deserve the win if you're not persevering when you face these hard things.
So would you say maybe a good way to kind of sum this up a little bit is, back when I first introduced you, we
Mhm,
talked about people who maybe struggle to bring their dreams to life
mhm,
and actually follow through with them. So
yeah,
maybe a good way to sum this up is it's not necessarily about the finish line. It's not
mhm,
about this, measure of success or whatever, because as you pointed out, any ideas that we have about what success looks like are strictly man-made. They're things that
mhm,
we've come up with on our own, so they're not
mhm,
real.
mhm,
And any of us can change what the definition of success is at any time.
mhm,
The real journey is going through the process. It's the growth. It's
mhm,
learning. It's constantly challenging yourself to get better. It's not necessarily about chasing that specific outcome. It's about growing. It's about going through those hardships. And if you're
mhm,
not ready to deal with a hardship, if a hardship is like to the point where it's about to break you,
mhm,
then if it breaks you,
mhm,
then that means that you weren't ready yet. You need to go back. You need to develop more skills. You need to develop more mental toughness. You need to go back and get those things built up so that you
mhm.
can come back and then you can persevere through those same challenges.
Yeah.
So they're not really
Can I add
failures.
on? So I remember what I wanted to say. I
Sure.
have two things to say in that. So
Cool.
basically, when we talk about it like that, what I meant by like let the people win who are
Hmm.
supposed to win and not in that
Hmm.
is like, for example, entrepreneurship, right? Entrepreneurship. So you have one business, maybe you weren't ready. There were other competitors who were doing better than you.
Yeah.
Then maybe it was their time. It was their turn to win at that very particular competition.
Right.
But I didn't want to go as far as field, right? This is just a matter of just one business.
Right.
But then the mindset goes, the perseverance goes, okay, if you fail, okay, no problem. are you gonna do they're gonna start the second business? Are you gonna use the skills and the mindset, like training everything you gained from the first one, and are you gonna maybe start up the next thing? And then maybe this time it's your time to win, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at it at like more macro perspective, like if there's a losing, there's someone else winning. And if there's
Yeah.
someone else winning, there's someone else losing, right?
Right.
So yeah, you can't expect you win all the time. Sometimes
Yeah.
you can let the other person to win. But at the macro score of your life, you don't have to stay at the loss all the time. Like
Right.
you still have opportunity to win.
Hmm.
There's gonna be your time. Like there's gonna be your turn to win. And then
Yep.
second thing I wanted to mention was I think this comes back to that discussion of it does feel uncomfortable not to have like that definition of whatever we talked about today.
Yeah.
But I think that is the answer. Like we started off from the conversation of having conversation about success not doesn't necessarily mean anything to you, right?
Yeah.
But in the same token, I think the most practical mindset you can have, I'm not talking about ideology, I'm talking about what's practical
Yeah.
for someone to have is knowing that yes, your success don't really matter, but at the same time knowing that like there's this competition where someone loses, someone wins, and like everything that we just talked about, right?
Yeah.
If you can have the both perspective, even though they seem kind of contradict,
Yeah.
then I think that just becomes your knowledge.
Yeah.
So and then I think that's where the true life test lies, is like many things are kind of contradicts, and then you kind of have to strike for balance too, because
Yeah.
when you are one extreme, there's just going to create vulnerability.
Yeah.
And if you saw my channel as we talked about, right, like there's a lot of things in there. The reason I did that was because it's practical.
Hmm.
Like I'm not one person, right? Like I'm one
Right.
person with many interests. I can't decide how my viewer finds me. I can't
Right.
decide I can't decide how my viewer should like me. Maybe some people's entering point is because I'm a young Asian woman who does makeup. Maybe someone else's entering point is I am a person who can talk about mindset. Like I can't decide for these people. Like
Yeah.
I I think it's more practical to have as many windows as I can have
Yeah.
to increase the chance of me appearing to as many people as I can, instead of me deciding this is who I am, this is how I should be, this is what I'm gonna like focus on. Because
Yeah.
by doing that, I'm excluding so much opportunities, and it's just
Yeah.
not practical. I'm caring more about my ego, about how I want to appear to other people. But
Yeah.
the the very um well kind of secret thing about this is that, or many people, what many people don't know about this is that you can't control what other people sees you as. Like if people think whatever the way they think of yourself, you can't convince them to think otherwise, you know?
Right.
And it's such a wasted energy to even try to convince someone who
Yeah.
doesn't see the value in whatever you're offering at the same time, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I just like, I go with the practicality more than ideology.
Hmm.
That's why I try to strike for many things, even though maybe some of them collide as an
Hmm.
idea. I think having that both perspective actually works in an advantage, not disadvantage.
Yeah, I think one thing you really hit on there too that I think is helpful for people to understand. You talked about how it's almost like a contradiction, right? It's like, well, if there's a competition and there's winners and losers, then how do I not get caught up on success and failure, right? And I think the answer in that is what you said. There is no answer. At the end of the day, it's really about, are you focused on your personal growth? Because if you focus on your personal growth, success will find you. you're going to be successful at some point because you're focused on the right thing, you know?
Mhm.
And for me, I even go the step further, and I think you may agree with this, is I focus on my growth for me personally. I focus on the value that I can give other people. But like you said, I can't decide for them what's valuable. It might be the makeup tips, it might be the mindset advice, it might be different things for different people. You just kind of put all this stuff out there because you're not trying to tell people what they have to find is valuable. But at the same time, you're focused on you. You're focused on what you find interesting. So for example, I'm going to assume you don't have an interest in like muscle cars because I didn't see any videos about muscle cars on your website, right? So you're not out there trying to be something that you're not. You're not trying to talk about things that don't interest you just because somebody else might be interested in them. You're still being true to yourself, but you're not trying to force a specific idea on somebody else. You're allowing them to kind of choose what they want to view.
Mhm.
And I think that's how you find the balance, right? Is by focusing on yourself, but providing value to others.
Mhm.
So before we wrap up, tell me a little bit about your book. Why should somebody go out and buy your book?
Yeah. So I think you kind of got a lot of essence of who I am by now, if you made it this far. But what you can expect from my book, The Game of Self Domination, is a lot of me, like what we've been seeing so far. This is a book of passion. It talks about passion. When people ask me who this book is for, I really say that this book is for anyone who is looking for growth, like personal growth. I do have two kind of people that I know this book is not for. And I think it's actually better to describe who this book is not for, because this book really, you can use the framework that I'm that I'm teaching in this book is really applicable for anyone who needs to create the mental transformation in the name of creating a happier life, because growth is happiness, right?
Yeah.
But so the two kind of people that I don't recommend this book is for is, one kind is someone who likes to be told that staying realistic is good. Like, this book might annoy you because it's such a passionate book. I talk about like, go get the unrealistic dream, like let's shoot for the star, right? Like to the moon, like anyway. So this book will annoy you, so don't buy it. The second people, the group of people that I don't recommend is people who are searching for answers, because you're not gonna get answer. Like, in the end of the day, as we discussed today, I think a lot of it is resistance and continuous work, continuous effort. Growth never ends. And actually, the secret again, the secret of this is, when the growth actually ends, you're dead.
Yeah.
So there's no happiness there anymore. Like, you're
Yeah.
not living your life to be retired, actually, believe it or not.
Yeah.
After 6 months, let's say 2 years, 2 years of doing nothing, you're gonna be dead. Like, you're gonna be so unhappy, right? And
Yeah.
we're gonna talk about that too in this book. So those are two people that I don't recommend. What do I talk about in this book? Like I said, is three phases. How someone can create mental transformation. The first phase, I talk about how someone can create dream. And during this process, all we talk about is emotional building, because there's no space for logical thinking in this phase. It's the logic thinker that stops us from pursuing unrealistic goals, right? You will always have a reason why you shouldn't commit to whatever you want to commit. So all we talk about in this phase is, how can we create that strong, crazy emotion for you to finally commit and create that decisiveness. Second phase, I talk about perseverance, something that we talked a lot about today. um, two major things, I would say, even three. The first thing I talk about in this phase is self-awareness, because I think what comes to surprise to people oftentimes is actually how much they don't know about themselves, how much they
Yeah.
actually didn't even understand what they wanted. So I give people kind of perspectives and framework that people can apply in order for them to think in terms of what they want
Yep.
of themselves. And then the second thing we talk about is, so let's talk about efficiency and effectiveness, because I always also wanted to include some very practical tips. And
Mhm.
then this method that I developed, I call it Life Up Method, consists of 5 different ideas from business and economics. And coming from business background, I have this eye of picking up ideas from business and then understanding in terms of how we can use them in life.
Mhm.
So the first one comes from Italian engineer, the second one is from British economist, the third one is from uh, the Japanese automotive company, the fourth one comes from US or global consulting firm, the fifth one is from a US president, the 34th US president. So all of these people and entity had their own theories that they applied on their business practices.
Yep.
So I would like lay them out in a framework that people can use to organize their life and create more efficiency and effectiveness in order for them to achieve the goals that we just made in the first phase.
Yep.
It comes with the framework. But what I want people to really extract from this whole exercise is the thinking goes behind it.
Yep.
So not necessarily the method itself, but the thinking. Because
Yep.
when you acquire this method, like you can't, even if you don't want to, like you can't help think in terms of effectiveness when you create tasks or goals.
Yep.
Um, well, I would say tasks. Okay, the third thing I talk about in this phase is how to have high sense of emotional intelligence, because
Mhm.
a lot of shit is about to go down, right?
Yep.
And it's not gonna be all rainbow and candies and like sweet, like, easy load. It's gonna be a lot of hardships. And one thing I notice is we fail to navigate through these hardships because these are very emotional experiences,
Mhm.
and we tend to take them very emotionally, we
Yep.
tend to take them very personally as well. But having high sense of emotional intelligence means that you are able to navigate through these emotional experiences with logics and not taking things so personally. So we talk about that a lot because we talk about failures. Let's
Yep.
redefine failures. And then finally, the third phase, we talk about success and happiness. And what we talked about today earlier, what I've come to notice is like it's a macro score of how beautiful in the end of the day you can like recognize your life was in your deathbed. Like no one is caring about how good you look on your Instagram. No one's caring about like how much money you have in your bank at that time, right? So it just gives you this perspective of like let's rethink about what happiness should be in our terms. So that pretty much summarizes the whole book.
Sounds like an awesome book. Definitely, I would recommend everyone not in those two categories to go
Yeah.
and check it out. If you're in those two categories, just don't even bother. It's just
Yeah, don't even bother. But I don't think there's gonna be anyone who's listening to your podcast who fit into those two categories.
no. Hopefully, if they're trying to create unshakable habits, if they're in one of those two categories, they're trying to get out, and
Mm,
it's okay for them to still buy the book since they're trying to get out, right?
yeah.
Well, Natsune, I appreciate you joining me today. If someone wants to follow you or get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yes, so my website is, well, my name is Natsune Oki. So if you Google type in Natsune Oki, something will show up. My website is Life Up Education TV. I'm pretty active on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, in the order I mentioned. Um, there's also a Facebook group that you can join from Life Up Tribe. Well, there's a page called Q&A page on my website. People can drop in question in that Facebook group. It's completely free. I'm never gonna charge you anything. So you just drop in and then you can ask me anything. And then I will feature your question in my show, Ask a Natsune Show on my YouTube.
Cool. appreciate you again for being here and being willing to share all of your wisdom, knowledge, and growth with us. I do want to remind everyone that the Unshakable Habits podcast can be found on YouTube at unshakablehabits.com/YouTube or wherever your favorite podcast plays. So this is Stephen Box. Once again, thanking our guest, Natsune Oki, for joining us today and reminding you that you were not designed to be average. It is possible to take your habits from unsustainable to unshakable. But first, you need a vision, the skills, and then you must take the actions.
Thanks for listening to the Unshakable Habits Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest, please subscribe at unshakablehabits.com/YouTube or on your favorite podcast app. You can learn more about Unshakable Habits at unshakablehabits.com. Until next week, be unshakable, my friends.